I will introduce the panelists to my left here. We have Michael Cortez, excuse me, from is the founder of World Gemological Services, a gemological consulting and appraisal business, and owner of Michael Moses Jewelers, with 2 retail locations, showrooms based in Newport Beach, California. Mike attended and completed specialized training from the GIA as a resident program, earning credentials as a GG and the AJP. He also worked at the GA Diamond Grading Laboratory after graduation and has lectured to several groups on the subjects of jewelry and appraising antiques. He's also pioneered and developed a number of industry models and estimation procedures regarding the insurance replacement sector. We also have John Nichols to Mike's left, who is a native here of Las Vegas, works for Huntington Jewelers, which is celebrating their 62nd year of business in the Valley, which is commendable in this current economic economy. He's former employee of Kirk C. Root Designs in Austin, Texas, and is a $1 million seller, personal sales in the retail arena. We also have Martin DeWitt, who represents MB Diamonds. He's been involved with diamonds for over 40 years. He's the executive director of MB Diamonds USA, makers of the Sirius Star constellation of diamonds that are mined, designed, cut, and polished in Canada. He is executive director of MB. He has an MS in Minerals Geography from the University of Illinois, a BA in African History from the University of Illinois, and is a GG since 2003 and a certified gemologist appraiser with AGS since 1984. He's a former director of research for Hearts on Fire, Diamond Wizard, shop foreman of 8-Star, and the director of the American School of Diamond Cutting. I will now introduce Saville Stern, COO of RapNet, for a brief presentation. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Let me tell you what we're going to do today. It's very informal. We really don't want to keep this as a kind of panel presenter versus the audience. Even though we're on a podium, we really want to keep this as a discussion between everybody. I think everybody's got views and everybody's an expert. And I mean that in a good way. And we'd really like to hear from everybody. The idea is to discuss the state of grading, the different grading laboratories, the different ways that people grade, that the grading houses grade, and the experiences that people have. We specifically this year put retailers on the panel. We often keep the discussion sort of inside the industry, but really what I'm after today is the retailer's perspective, because in the end the retailers represent the entire industry to the public. The retailers are merchandising and selling diamonds with certificates to the public, and really it's the public's perception and the public's confidence in what they're buying that's going to determine how well we do as an industry, and we're going to be judged by that as well. And if there's a shift in consumer confidence, or it even shatters, it's going to reverberate through the industry. So one aspect of that is grading and grading standards, and that's what we're here to discuss today. Essentially, I'm going to go through 3 areas. What is the role of certificates? What are they for? They've become very popular. 20, 30 years ago, certificates weren't made for every good quality diamond. Nowadays, there's the internet, there's the Rapport price sheet, and there's certificates, and those things together all work together in a way to say, to classify diamonds right down to about 15, 20 different characteristics that each of them have an impact on price. The next issue I want to get into is what I call the grading game. And we'll get into how people play the grading game. Some play by the rules, some don't. And we'll go through that. And the last area is called grading the labs. What I really want to do there is just show you some statistics from RapNet, which is the Rappaport Diamond Trading Network. RapNet's a diamond trading network with about 900,000 diamonds on every day of the week from over 2,000 suppliers. There's 7,200 odd members, and it's a good representation of the diamond industry, of the diamond market. And I want to show you some statistics from RapNet, what diamonds they're on there, how they shape up, relative price for similar quality diamonds between the labs, how things have moved over between last year and this year. and I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion and a lot of suggestions. Let's dive right in. I think I have to press this button. Yeah, that's the one. I'll start off with giving at least what my view is on the role of certificates in the diamond industry. First of all, obviously, they're about facilitating trade and consumer confidence. That's the big heading. But what do they do? First of all, it's a guarantee of authentication. Let me not use the word guarantee. It's a document that authenticates the diamond from a legitimate third party. So it's not the diamond is what it is because I'm the retailer telling you this. It's not it is what it is because the supplier said what it is. It is what it is because a legitimate third party grading house said this is what the diamond is. When it comes to retailing, certificates are used in merchandising all the time. What I mean by that is, and Martin Rappaport alluded to this in his speech this morning, if any of you were at the breakfast, if somebody doesn't want an EVVS1, you can always sell them an F or a G. In other words, you can use the certificate to merchandise, and then and there's price points for every single combination that you can think of, and the certificates help in that merchandising because you can hit price points along the way everywhere you go. It's used as a sales tool, different labs, and as part of the authentication, it's a great sales tool. And Martin made me put in commoditization as well, because certificates can also one day be used to, or not even one day, are already being used to sell paper, and you don't actually have to have the diamond, you don't actually have to inspect the diamond. If the certificate is good enough, you can just sell the diamond based on the paper. And when you can commoditize them, diamonds by referring to a particular set of qualities, shape, size, color, clarity, and a few other qualities, cut, fluorescence, and you can categorize, you can sell categories of diamonds without having to actually sell individual diamonds. So all of this is the role of certificates in the industry as we move on. It's in everyone's interest to bolster consumer confidence and trade confidence at every level. And it's in everyone's interest to fight against anything that undermines that confidence. Now, it's healthy that there are multiple grading labs. It's healthy that there's competition amongst grading labs. They offer different services. They offer different services to their clients and to the public. And it promotes expertise and gemological development. And so it's a very healthy thing that there's multiple grading labs. The flip side is, though, that with multiple grading labs, you get all the labs speaking a common language, but not necessarily using that language to describe the same article. And I think we all know what I'm talking about. One lab's D is another lab's E or F, or even G or H, depending on the quality of the lab. And at least in our view, there's a need for standards. We already have a common language. GA developed a common language for grading diamonds, but there aren't common standards between the labs. And that's something that I think is, we discuss it every year, everybody knows, but I think it's getting to the point where something's going to happen. Because if some diamonds fall through the cracks, and the cracks widen deep enough, the floor may just fall out from beneath us all, and we could find ourselves in a big consumer backlash when, if we assist grading labs in reducing and having looser standards. If we, as the consuming public of the grading labs, we buy their certificates, if we push them to have looser and looser standards and they respond, we could end up with a consumer backlash one day, and all the certificates will fall into that hole that's going to open up beneath us. So it's something that we need to consider, and it's something that we need to deal with. Okay, I'm going to quickly give you an introduction to the next area, but before we go into it in full, I'm going to maybe pose some questions to the panel, as well as, pose some questions to the panel as well as to the audience, and throw it open to a brief discussion, and we can go from there. Otherwise, I've got more stuff to say, it's okay. But I'd like to actually hear from you, because certainly I'm no expert. I'm certainly no expert in the technical aspects of grading, nor am I an expert in every single lab. but I do run RapNet, and I do see what goes on RapNet, and I do deal with a number of cases when things go wrong, and there are some things wrong. And I'm going to bring those examples when I talk about bending the grading standards and thieves and liars, and we will discuss that. But I can tell you that, well, no, let me not go into that now. John, you've got a couple of questions that we were going to pose just to get the discussion going, and I'd like to move from there. Essentially, yeah, could you?
Well, I have a couple questions for each panelist, because you are all engaged in a slightly different areas of the business. But Mike, we'll start with you. You own a couple successful retail stores, but you've primarily began your business in the retail, but then moved to appraising, which you do appraisals for, I don't know, 60, 70 stores throughout the country, primarily in the West. But how do you address the fluctuations in pricing or in valuation that you and your staff have to deal with when grading different or evaluating different diamonds from different laboratories?
So, it's real simple. I always tell people it is what it is. And, what we do is this. We evaluate what we see. If the reports fall in line with what we see, that's great. We have another supporting document. The challenge that we tend to have sometimes with, specifically getting to appraisals, is that sometimes these reports don't fall in line with what we think the quality of the stone might be. And the insurance company sometimes feels the same way. And so there ends up being a disconnect there. So what we typically try to do is it's difficult. I think that sometimes people don't realize this, especially, I don't know how many of you guys do appraisals out here or how many of you understand them, but my job becomes so much of a mediation job, and I don't appreciate that. But I know that a lot of these things probably will be resolved. I think it has a lot to do with being honest in what you do, and I think that it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time, but I will say that the insurance companies are starting to come back to us and saying they won't accept certain types of certificates. And it's becoming a bigger challenge for us, because now we're between the consumer and the insurance company. So we really hope that that as a team we can work together to remedy some of these things, and we're here to support those labs that fall within that type of standard. I think that's the thing we're after.
Thank you. John, we'll start with you next. And how you address retail clients or people coming into your space and asking for diamonds that are graded by certain laboratories, or for you to potentially match a price for a diamond graded by one laboratory or another, that you then have to just describe to them or explain to them the differences in value?
One of the things that most people do not understand is that purchasing a diamond is probably the most emotional decision that will be made. And this needs to be a positive reinforcement. And with the different laboratories trying to justify this window being so big, this window being so big, it really puts you on the defensive. And when you're trying to move that diamond the 18 inches across the counter, and you have to justify everything there and not appear like a bad guy, then it becomes quite confusing and challenging.
Are people coming in and asking for paper over the value of the stone or the diamond? Do you have to kind of switch gears and say, hey, are you buying something based upon what's written on paper, or what you see physically in the diamond when you put it, 3 feet away from your eye? Or
the questions that I usually get are, why is this diamond with this report this price, and this diamond with this report this price, and the reports say that they're the same thing? Obviously they're not. It's like, I don't know how many of you here are single, but I am, and if you've ever been to the dating sites on the internet, believe me, there is a difference. You do want to see the diamond.
Thank you. And then Martin, your diamonds are graded by AGS laboratories and AGS laboratories exclusively. What went into your or MB's collective decision to go with AGS over any other laboratories?
Well, I think that decision I would back up a second. To me, the various labs in many ways represent various brands and serve different audiences. And I have experience, not only, most of my experience is as a cutter, I'm also a retailer. I cut for the trade, so I have to cut to standard myself. Mm-hmm. Then I advise, or I work with MB. And MB's brand is based on a patented cut. And that cut is a very high-performance diamond. And AGS has distinguished itself as the lab for diamond cut grading. That was its original inception, and that's really their brand in the marketplace. And so if, to market a premium cut brand, that's, to me, a cut brand, that's what you're after. In terms of commoditization, the 4 C's, I think, have gone a long way to commoditizing diamonds in general since I've been in the trade for 40 years. And those 4 C's I generally think of as color, clarity, carat weight, and cost. And a lot of the differentiation in brands comes from the fact that cost seems to weigh very heavily in the buying decision from the consumer side of things. And so cost is what we pander to a lot of times, and that can affect different grading standards. I cut, personally, a lot of times my work has to go to GIA. That's what other retailers are looking for, or wholesalers are looking for in particular, is GIA certification. They want to see the triple X's or the VG, and so that's important. So to me, it's really about cutting standards more so than color and clarity. I don't have those issues. In terms of the jewelry store itself, we find, and our philosophy is, when a customer comes into the jewelry store, the #1 job we have is to provide a very particular service, which is to make the buying experience easy, not complicated. So we don't generally enter into a discussion about certificates at all. And what we do is we talk about the diamonds that we have, and we assume a level of authority and authenticity about ourselves in our store. My wife and I are both GGs, that's up on the wall, but we don't make reference to that. And so it amazes me how many times that's really not even a part of the discussion. People come to us based on our reputation, and they will take we try to make it easy for them to buy. We don't try and give them a lot of options. We try to give them the options that we're listening for, that they're looking for. And generally in terms of retail, if it's a branded item, it's usually an American Gem Society report on it. And if it's not branded, it's a call stone or something. Almost always it's a GIA certificate.
Thank you.
Well, then let me ask you, and as well as any retailers in the audience, how do you use diamond certs to sell when you sell? What do you say to clients? What do you do? Is there anybody?
Okay, so I'll answer that. You're asking how we use these certificates to sell. I think we can all agree on this. Depending on where you're at, you're going to see certain groups of people looking for certain types of certificates. Specifically in Orange County, we see a huge call for higher quality diamonds. I think in general, I think some of us can disagree or some can agree. I don't know, but that's what we found. And when we get into larger goods, the consumers tend to want a GI certified diamond, and it's almost like you have no chance to show them anything else. That's how it tends to be, at least in higher quality, larger goods. Not to say that you won't sell another lab certificate, not at all. But I will say that I see the trend shifting more towards GIA certified diamonds. I don't know if it'll go back the other direction. And I really, like I said earlier, I think that if we can all come to an agreement to grade, I think the way that stones should be graded, I think that consumers, like you said earlier about a backlash, I think consumers want confidence in what they're buying, and I think that's our responsibility, and I think that we need to follow through with that.
Okay. What about the internet? The internet / prices / margins. retailers are scrambling to keep pace with that. One of the easy ways out is to sell a cert of lower quality in your store, for a similar price to what they could get on the internet for a cert of maybe higher quality. Does that happen? Is that happening? What are people doing?
I can take a shot at that. There's obviously a lot of different strategies, and the consumer generally comes in with that information on a price shopping mission. And so my gut reaction is to tell them, first off, I'll have a little bit of a discussion before. I'll always answer a customer's question. Sometimes I won't answer their direct question right away. And what I'll say to them is something to the effect of, that's a great question. I want to answer that for you. Let me preface that just a little bit. And what I'll say is, I don't know if you know it, but there's over 30,000 retail jewelers in the United States. There's chains, there's department stores, there's all kinds of places to buy jewelry and diamonds. Almost every one of those jewelry stores, jewelry outlets, has a buyer. And what they do is they go and they buy diamonds. And they buy, when they see a list, they call a supplier and say, I want to see the diamond. And they want to see the diamond before they buy it, regardless of what certificate it is. And I just want you to know that when you go on the internet and look at a list of diamonds, almost by definition, those diamonds have already been rejected by a horde of expert diamond buyers who want, and it's their job to see minute differences in diamonds, to physically see it before they make a purchase. Wouldn't you want to do the same thing? Now, if you've gone to the net, and even if you forget that, I'll tell them, draw up something. Draw up a 1 carat, draw up a GSI 1, and one certificate. I don't care which one it is, GIA, AGS, whatever it is. Draw that up, and you'll see, and I don't care what site you're on, you'll see several options in that category. And those options will have different prices. They won't be the same for the individual stones. Not just on carat weight, different per carat prices. Why do you think that is? Very, very, very minute differences can cause extreme differences in price, value, beauty, everything. That's why you need an expert to help you in this process. Let me make it easy for you. So, that's a bit of a soliloquy there, but it gives them a chance to realize that their search is important, but it also gives them some frame of reference of what that importance is about. And it's not just a numbers game.
Okay, Gary.
Of course, this is the standard question that I ask every year. When you hold these things, what Martin has just said is that stores have buyers who know what they're doing. But I put that same question to all of the people who run labs. Would you buy a diamond based only on seeing the grading report from your own lab, let alone any other lab? And anybody here want to put their hand up and say that they would do that, buying a diamond for a loved one, for their mother, their wife, their mistress? Would they actually buy a diamond? Yes. Peter would. Yes. Okay. We've got two. Would you buy an SI? Would you buy an SI2 diamond or an SI1 diamond? Yep. Mm-hmm. That's the first time,
confidence for
other than Temis at IGI, who has actually said that. You would too. Okay. That's refreshing. It's the first time in asking that question for about 6 years.
Well, your persistence must be paying off.
I think when when customers come into your store, you can tell them don't buy online. We've all had horror stories. We've all bought stuff on, eBay or Blue Nile just to test it, and we've seen black spots, we've seen problems. The problem is you can only tell them when they come in your store. There's nowhere when you're looking online that says don't buy online. I don't know if we can all get together and put in a pool of money and buy a website that says these are all of our horror stories we've gotten from the jewelry industry. But, are there any ideas? Is there anything we can do? Also, like you said, you don't want to be negative because this is the most emotional. However, we've all had these horrible stories, and the only way we can tell the public is if they come in. Want to comment on that?
I think I can feel that question. What you're actually asking is, how do you get the customer into the store rather than purchasing on the internet? In my experience, I've found that they will use the internet to get enough information to be dangerous, but they don't purchase over the internet unless they talk to someone in the jewelry business. And that's where you could drop the ball and have them buy from the internet, or you could make a sale. It's just all on the approach. And one of the key things that I found is most of the diamond salespeople that I've observed do more talking than listening. And if the good Lord gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that should tell you, listen twice as much as you talk, and the customer will tell you what they need, and if you can fill that need, they have no need to go to the internet.
I also think, sort of ancillary to that, because I've had that question posed a lot of times, you know, customer comes into the store, blah, 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 blah. And it's not directly to your question, but when the customer comes into your store, that's the operative premise right there. They're your customer, and they're your customer at that point, not to gain, but they're your customer at that point to lose. And I think that's to your point. Whether they've got information from elsewhere or not, they are on a buying mission.
Yeah.
An engagement bridal customer, it's not if they're going to buy, it's where they're going to buy. And they will buy. And if you lose them, part of that to me is to get over this notion that particular diamond, for instance, is a luxury purchase. It's not. It's a necessity. And if they don't make that purchase in your store after they've walked into your store, you drop the ball somewhere. And you need to address that, and your staff needs to address that, and they need to own that. It's not just, oh, gee whiz, maybe they decided to go on a cruise, or maybe they bought something else. No, something didn't happen that they wanted to happen, some kind of verification of what they're after, some kind of clarity that they wanted to see. So.
Yeah, we had a question here, sorry.
Yes, first of all, I wanted to address your first question, which is, you know, how do we feel about having certificates? And when they first came out and they started to become very available, I was very happy because I felt I could say what these gentlemen said. You don't have to take my word. You don't have to take someone else's word. You can see it right on a certificate. But over the years, I will agree with this gentleman in the second row over here, you could look at 2 SI2 grade stones coming from the identical laboratory, and they are so extremely different. One looks like an SI1 if that's an SI2, or the SI2 should be an I1, and it's very, very upsetting when you think you're buying a G and you get it into your office and it has this certificate that it looks like an I. You can see the yellow, and it's starting to get a little frustrating even to me. And you know, and how do I explain this to the customer? You know, 30 back or 35 back, but it's not what it says.
Jerry, you want to respond directly to that? Okay.
So the purpose of the conference is standardization, or standards rather. And I have a question about SI. You have SI1, you have SI2, and then you have I1. That's the standard, right? Why does Rappaport have SI3? How could that affect people? They go on the internet, they look at a Rappaport list, they go, oh, here's SI3. Wait a second, that's not part of the standards. SI1, SI2, I1. Why do you print SI3? Because that would confuse a person.
This is a good time to call on Martin to come and answer that question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was at lunch with a human rights activist, but...
that mic is low.
Well, essentially, I don't think the laboratories have any idea what they're doing when it comes to SIs. I think laboratory people are fundamentally screwed up because they're looking through microscopes, when normal people, real people, consumers, look at a diamond either like this and say, is it eye clean? And they make a decision of purchase, often is not, on whether or not the stone is eye clean. And gemologists have their heads screwed on backwards because they're looking at it through a microscope with a three-dimensional look, and they come up with their own grading standards. Now, when you see certificates that I think the young lady here spoke correctly. Here's an SI2, and you know what? That SI2 is worth about as much as an SI1. Here's an SI2, and it's worth like an I1. So you say, excuse me, with all due respects to gemologists, you're not diamanteurs. You don't drive the business. You're like the driver of my limousine. You don't own the diamond business, so they should just back off. Now, why did we come up with an SI3? What happened was, I think that some diamond dealers in New York convinced GIA that in a 5-carat emerald or a 10-carat emerald, if there was a black pinpoint, very noticeable, but it was still kind of small, that they shouldn't really call it an I1. They should call it an SI2, etc. And so what happened was this whole approach to SI wandered away from the essence of what it was supposed to be, which is an eye-clean stone, in my view. I remember the old days. I'm an old kind of guy, okay? And in my days when we started, SI meant it's eye-clean. I1 meant it's not eye-clean. That got messed up. First thing we asked because it's a political games, I think. Big stones, etc. But I think it also got messed up because gemologists have a different perspective. Now, I'm not saying gemologists are evil. They're not. They're nice people, and they're trying to do the best that they can. But the gemologists can't sell anything. They don't live on the counter. They don't live talking to people, and I don't think they realize the importance of eye clean. So when gemology started to ignore eye clean, Rapport started to ignore gemology. And I don't want to say I'm ignoring gemology. What I'm saying is this. Is the stone better or worse? It really depends how much people pay for it. If you live in a world where SI2s are more valuable than SI1s, and that has happened, then a bad SI1 and a good SI2, sometimes you get a higher price for the SI2, believe it or not, particularly if there's no certificates. HIV has goods they are trading a lot of times without certificates. Then I have to say, with all due respects to the GIA, which I love, represent, work with IGI, which I think is doing a great job, by the way, okay, really. All due respect to them, they don't make the market. They don't pay the price. They don't buy and sell the goods. So when I look at the real world of trading, I say there has to be an SI3. You can't have a barrier between SI2 and I1 the size of Texas. And what are you grading? You know, I'd be very happy if we really knew, if the geologists knew what an SI2 was. But frankly, I think that they kind of look at the stone in different ways. So, you know, I think an SI3 makes a lot of sense, frankly. And I don't know if the GIA, we asked the GIA, the World Federation of Diamond Bourses asked the GIA, everyone asked the GIA to come up with an SI3 grade. They haven't. I still go. And by the way, as you get to the SI3s or I1s, I don't know that the Rapport list is necessarily based on this or that laboratory. It's based on you looking at a stone, seeing what it is. But I mean, my big point is I'm not going to let the gemological tail wag the diamond industry dog. No offense. Boop. There's an answer.
Consumers out there looking at diamonds, comparing them, and they know the standard is SI2 to I1, and they see you printing SI3.
I don't accept the standard of SI2. I don't understand. I don't accept the standard of SI2 to I1. I really don't. I don't accept that standard.
Oh, you don't?
No, I don't accept the standard. I really don't. Okay, and I don't accept the standard because I don't think the gemologists are grading the stones properly. Sorry, I'm allowed to have my opinion. Okay, so there's, you know, there's God, there's GIA, and some people are atheists. I don't know, but I don't accept them. I just don't think it's fair. And by the way, the other thing that really blew me on this was when I went into the market and I looked at people's boxes of diamonds before we did the SI3, and I looked at their goods. I said, "What's this? Okay, this is SI1. What's this? What's this? This is SI3." These dealers were sorting their goods and lumping them together in that way. And to me, dealers talk, and gemologists do the tell.
So, but maybe you should put a notice on the RAP list that says that SI3 is not part of the international accepted system for diamond grading, and as a result of market conditions, you're stating...
Wait, I think this is great, this international standard.
Internationally accepted standard.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So let's see. So does GIA get along with IDC about the micron rule for flawless? No. Excuse me. How about EGL? Okay, maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. It depends which color of EGL you're dealing with in the last 5 minutes. But some of those labs are traded. Okay? So are they non-existent? I look at this thing and I see competition. Some people using terminology in different ways. I saw this once and I said, what the hell is this? It was a D that looked like a J. He says, well, our grading standard starts with A. And so, there's all kinds of crap going on there. But fundamentally, there are standards, and I don't know that the standard that SI2 is there today is really that relevant completely when it comes to the true honest grading inside the market. And my goal has always been to reflect what I see in the trading market. And if dealers are sorting their goods as SI3, okay, I'd have to look at it. I would say, one other thing I would say to you about what we call the BBC problem, blacks, browns, and center inclusions. And I don't see gemology laboratories dealing with that. And by the way, standards. You know how long it took the J to come up with a cut grade? How many conferences we held and yelling and screaming that I had to put in a cut grade, going back to Tyval's paradox in 1984.
How long was it? Was it 15 or 20 years? Was it 15 or 20 years?
Cut grade?
Yeah.
Oh, it's only 5. How many years?
Yeah. From the beginning?
Yeah. Oh, the J wouldn't do a cut grade, and they're great people, the J, don't get me wrong. But all these things take time. So I don't know what's going to happen. I sit there, I look at a bunch of Indians, I look at a bunch of Jews, I look at a bunch of Armenians, I see how they do business, and I try my best to reflect that. And what I see is SI3s, out there. So, in terms of disclaiming to the world that we don't use the standards, who are these gemologists to tell the diamond industry what all the standards should be when it comes to SIs? I just, sorry. But Jerry, I respect your view and your opinion. Yeah.
I would like to help both Jerry and Martin and try to bridge a little bit.
He's such a peacemaker, this guy.
You are right, we should have standards. You are right, if the standards does not work, you make your own rule. You do something that will help the consumer to understand what we're doing. But I think the problem will come for something that the labs will not admit. Is it really subjective or objective, the result that they get? I'm coming from the technology side, so I addressed the subject a little bit, and as you try to analyze it, you see the real problem. First of all, it's amazing, the human brain capacity to see inclusions in diamond and grade it in a way that most of us are going to grade it almost the same, but it's always almost the same. No diamonds are alike. So you're going to take an SI2 that you have multiple inclusions all over. They don't look the same, and you're going to ask several human beings, all graders around the world, to grade it exactly the same. So maybe when they're coming from the GIAs, GG, and they have the same master set and all, eventually they get it right 100%. They go to the real world, and you have all kind of inclusions, and some of them that even the look of them you never seen in the lab, and you will have to grade it the same way. So I started working on trying to quantify it. If we can quantify it, we can have a standard. So I started measuring the volume of inclusion relative to the total volume of the diamond itself. That's not sufficient. So I start placing some values. If it's centered, I take off some points. If it's side, I add. The complexity of that is so great, it's not repeatable yet. So you can put some artificial intelligence, the human brain is even more innovative here, or can do things that we cannot compute, but I think we're still not there, and that gap is what we're discussing here. The disagreement between us is what we're discussing. And if you're 20 years in business, 20 years away from your education at GIA, in a lab that the customer push all the time, suddenly your standard shifts a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. Look, the story about the rabbi. Well, before I tell you the story of the rabbi, I'll just say one thing. Prices have to map to grading. If you give me grading where an SI2 is worth more than an SI1, and I don't know anything about diamonds, I don't understand anything, but I know that people pay more for this than they do for that, and this is an SI2, and they're paying more, or the same price, say more than an SI1, then I say, guess what, everybody? There's nothing wrong with people who are voting with their money in their pockets, because those guys tend to be right, or else they don't have any money in their pockets. Okay? So if those guys are saying this is better than that by voting with their money, I'm going to want a grading system that maps to the price that people pay. pay. And essentially that's something that we looked at with the SI3. About the rabbis, okay, so there's these two rabbis, there's one rabbi, and the rabbi's sitting there, and there's a knock on the door, and in comes this woman, and she says, you know, my husband, and she tells stories about the husband. The rabbi's, oh my God, terrible guy. So the guy says, the rabbi says, he says, you know, you're 100% right. And the guy, gets himself up, walks out, feels better, everything's good. 3 minutes later, in comes the wife, and she starts talking, the husband about the wife. Who did I use first? I talked about the husband first, right? Now comes the wife, she starts talking about the husband. Whoa, baby, the rabbi's beard stands up. Unbelievable. So the rabbi says tells Esther, you're 100% right. So she feels much better, she gets herself up, she walks out the door. Now the rabbi's wife is sitting in the kitchen listening to all this. So the rabbi's wife comes out and she says, what are you talking? How can he be 100% right? How can she be 100% right? And the rabbi looks at his wife and he says, you're 100% right. So, true story. Anyways, the rabbi's a pretty smart guy because everybody feels better, you know, except the wife. She's really good. But the thinking here is that we're going to have disagreements, like you're saying, about clarity. Some things are going to remain non-quantifiable. I will be looking at prices, and I will try my best to map communications about diamonds to prices. And the more I see, like for example, if you look at the Venus website, they're going to put a tremendous amount of information, gemological information, about a diamond. And some of it might be more or less relevant. So on one hand, you want to keep it simple, but essentially, diamond grading has to match to the prices. And the diamond industry, and I would just like to make this point also, we have you discussed the issue of these triple treatments and all that stuff? That came up here?
No.
It's coming up now. Okay, I would just say something about that if I might. You guys are doing such a great job.
Well, I'd like to say something about the price, pricing actually, because and it also reflects on your question about technology. You know, when you're looking for a technological answer, and you measure the volume next to the inclusion next to the volume of the overall inclusion, then you say, well, that doesn't quite match up. What I need to do is, you know, maybe put a value on where it's located in the center or toward the edge. Right there, you've made a decision, a value judgment, where even though it's a technological fix, you're moving toward a subjective, any assumption you put into your technological model becomes a subjective thing. Now, that can follow through. In terms of the price clearing mechanism and the price taking care of differences in the marketplace, the truth of the matter is that price is also very much determined by marketing. Demand is determined by marketing. People demand GIA certificates. GIA is also has been at this game longer than anybody. They have gemologists all over the world. They have, you know, I would argue a very, very strong brand, and that brand commands a price, regardless of what that grade may be. And I've heard them referred to as a top-tier lab. AGS is a top-tier lab. Other ones not top-tier labs. A lot of that is perception. I've been in the business long enough to know horror stories about most of the labs. And so I'm not completely convinced that a pricing mechanism takes care of all subjectivity either. I think what I said to begin with is that there are different seats for different folks. Some people just have to buy a diamond from Macy's at 50% off, and that's how they buy. And so it behooves them maybe to have a piece of paper that enables them to do that and stay in the marketplace and be profitable. I'm not picking on Macy's. That was more of a, you know, a sales style. There are people who are mall shoppers. There are people who are independent freestanding store shoppers. There are people who are buying from their broker upstairs on 47th Street. So there's any number of different customers, any number of different ways to appease those customers and take care of their needs. And I think that all the different labs fulfill those different purposes and are responsive to price mechanisms themselves. Each lab has its own set of standards. There is no standard in the industry. There is no standard in the industry.
Whoa.
There is no standard in the industry. People do what they want to do. There's nobody's hand is held to the fire.
Let Peter.
Peter, tell us about no standard.
Peter Yancey, AJS Laboratory. I have a couple of quick comments. A grading report from a top-tier laboratory is a very important document in the world today for more reasons than just cut, color, clarity, and carat weight. You know, you have synthetics. Synthetics are going to be increasingly more prevalent in our industry, and the synthetic problem, if you want to call it a problem, I look at it as an opportunity personally, but with respect to synthetics, retail jewelers, you guys can't be expected to spend somewhere near $250,000 to have a Raman spectrometer, liquid nitrogen, FTIR spectroscopes, and be able to detect HPHT treatment to improve color or to tell whether or not that diamond is natural or synthetic. So, top-tier laboratories give you that assurance. To brook a little bit with Martin's comment, there are standards. If you write VS1 on a report, that's a GIA grade because they invented that system. And if your grade is not the same as what GIA usually would call that stone, you are not grading correctly, period. Another quick comment about reports. So reports are really, really important. I always like to give credit where credit's due. SI3, for years and years I resisted that personally. Tom Tashi, I believe unless somebody in this room knows different, invented SI3 grade late 70s, early 80s. The reason why he invented it, and it is actually, I think, genius that he did it, is because it's an industry problem. Our industry has not ever been able to solve the negative connotation of when GI invented their grading system, SI2, I1, imperfect 1, imperfect 2, imperfect 3. The word imperfect carries such a negative connotation that our industry, since 1980, so 30-some years, has not been able to overcome that negative connotation, even though many, many years before it was changed to included 1, included 2, included 3. So you have a problem our own industry can't solve. Tom Tashi had the foresight to say, SI3, it's fair. Personally, I'm a proponent of SI3. I think it fits nicely in the grading system, if only to ameliorate this huge disparity in price between SI2 and I1. And if we get to have the time to get to the grading topics about bending grading rules and things like that.
Right, that's where I wanted to move on to that now because we're running out.
I just wanted to ask one question. Where does iClean fit into the grading system?
iClean is a difficult thing, Martin, and I'll tell you why.
Difficult.
Because my iClean,
the guy looks at the stone. Is it iClean? Isn't it iClean? Every dealer looks at it. What's difficult about it? You don't have eyes? Only microscopes?
My iClean, the amount of stones that are iClean to me are probably 5 times greater than what are iClean to her.
I think iClean depends on whether you're the buyer or the seller.
And that too. Exactly. So anyhow, I hope that's been helpful. Thank you.
5 years ago, I didn't wear glasses. I could see diamonds very well. Today, I wear glasses. I can see that same stone anymore.
What power?
Somebody sell that guy.
I wanted to move on to a different aspect because we're running out of time, and I really wanted to get onto a couple of other issues and show you some of the stats from RapNet, which is always a great crowd pleaser, seeing which labs match up to other labs. We're talking about the grading game, and we've kind of moved on to this, and you alluded to it a little bit where you said, the retail jeweler can't be expected to get all the equipment and the expertise to be able to find HPHT or any other treatments. Well, then who takes responsibility? And that's the question I wanted to pose as we go into this discussion of the grading game, because let's say a lab missed HPHT and graded it as a clean stone, as an untreated stone. If it's later found to have been treated before the lab graded it, who takes responsibility? Does the lab say, well, I did the best I could, it's not our problem? Or can you say to the lab, no, I went to you as an expert, you missed it. I'm out of pocket here, I've got to take the stone back, I've lost money. Maybe you have to go back to your supplier and go back as far along the chain as you can. But is there a lab responsibility when it comes to things like misgrading, soft grading, missing treatment? Does or should labs take responsibility, or are you saying we did the best we can? You know, it's kind of like if you go to a doctor and they take blood and they analyze your blood and they tell you have a disease or you don't or whatever, and they're wrong. There's a responsibility somewhere along the line.
Well, with any process you would have, if you did your due diligence and did all the procedures and looking to see if it's high pressure, high temperature, or whatever document that you did this, then there is a level of responsibility. If you just didn't follow your procedure, I think it's actionable.
Yeah, if you were negligent, I would agree it's actionable. But, well, this leads us on to the issues of what you call thieves and liars and bending the rules. Look, everyone knows there's grading games that go on like this, where I spoke to a dealer in New York the other day, and he tells me, how do I add value? I look at a diamond, and if I see a GA, it's not going to get a good grade because technically it's whatever grade, but it looks okay, so I send it to EGL and I get a better grade. If I see it's a good-looking stone, or even if it's not so good-looking, but technically it's going to get a better grade, I send it to GIA. In other words, he says I add value to the stone by choosing the right lab to grade it. It's a little bit, in a minute, it's a little bit of an issue, although that's probably, you know, skating on the edge of the rules, but still within the game. Then you get other people, in fact it was the same dealer in New York, but that doesn't matter, who said to me, I send my stones all the way to Hong Kong to get graded. And I tell the lab what color or clarity I want, and they tell me if they can do it. Very often they surprise me and do better. And not too often do they surprise me and say they can't do it. But he says it does happen, they're a very honest lab. Sometimes they tell me they can't give me the color and clarity I ask for. You know, now look, that's not far, you know, that's not so far-fetched, because in the old days, not that long ago, you could sit across the table from the gemologist at GA and also discuss the color and clarity you were getting. So it's not completely far-fetched, although this is, I think, a little bit more along the lines of printing paper as opposed to grading diamonds. That's already bending the rules out of shape. That's when the cracks that I spoke about earlier are starting to appear, and if these cracks widen too much, the whole floor could be, you know, pulled out from underneath us. So there's a question about selling paper as opposed to selling diamonds, bending the rules, and then there's thieves and liars. And when I talk about thieves and liars, and I just want to get through this so that we can open the discussion again, what I'm really talking about is people who are using the popularity of grading certificates as a tool to deceive. This has got nothing to do with the grading labs themselves. They're being used as a tool to deceive. Three cases have come our way recently. You know, on RapNet we see a lot of disputes. We see a lot of issues, and then they turn to us to try and resolve it, or at least let us know about it. And that's why I said earlier, by the way, that iClean depends on the buyer or the seller, because, you know, RapNet's an electronic network, and the guy in Australia buys an iClean diamond from a dealer in Belgium, and when he gets it, he says, this is an iClean, I can see from across the room it's not iClean, and then the guy says, it looks clean to me, you know, and so it's a bit difficult to sell iClean when you're not both in the same room wrestling it out, which is why it's good, actually, to have objective grading standards, but on this particular area of iClean, it's a bit difficult. We've had three instances recently that people should be aware of, first of all, and there are more of them. First of all, what I call, well, there's obviously the easy one is forging a certificate. You take a piece of paper that isn't a real certificate from a lab, make it look like it, and you sell a diamond with a forged certificate. That's out-and-out fraud, and you know, the labs do their best to try and put security measures into their certificates, and online verification has gone a long way to helping this problem. For a long time, the labs resisted having online verification, but now it's commonplace. Everybody's doing it. That's one way. There's another thing which I call forged diamonds, although that's not really the right term, but it's the flip side of forged certificates, which is taking a diamond of lesser quality and recutting it to match a real, actual existing certificate. You match the weight, you match the dimensions, you match everything, and you sell that diamond along with an original certificate which is ready for another diamond, and you sell that. And that's come, you know, we've seen that recently coming up a few times on RapNet. we're tracing it back as far as we can, and we're going to find the people, and those people obviously excluded from the RapNet diamond trading network. But it's these kind of people that give the entire industry a bad name and put us at risk. And then there's, of course, the undisclosed treatments and the synthetic diamonds, or the lab-created diamonds, which are all okay as long as there's disclosure. But when you try to pass off a diamond that's treated as natural, and in fact, we've come across cases recently where diamonds have been triple treated. In other words, they're HPHT once, then treated again to hide the treatment, and treated a third time to wipe out traces of the treatment that was hiding the treatment, and then it goes to the lab. And the lab misses it because obviously the treaters are going to be one step ahead of the lab as the lab plays catch up. Every time a new treatment comes out, they find it, but they get that little gap. That particular guy also, that particular one's also been traced back to the person who originated it in GIA's, asked them to no longer submit diamonds to the laboratory, and RapNet's asked them to no longer be a member of RapNet. But that's quite significant, because there you're using the lab as a vehicle to perpetuate your fraud, your illegal dealings. And then, of course, what IGI discovered the other day in Antwerp, which I'm sure everybody knows about, where lab-created diamonds were submitted as natural diamonds, natural diamonds, and then IGI caught it and alerted the industry. And we're seeing more and more of this, which means that it's likely there are an enormous amount of lab-created diamonds being traded as natural at the moment. These sort of games, these sort of thieves and liars are what put us all at risk. They put us all at risk because, if you remember right at the beginning, I spoke about consumer confidence and the certificate giving that legitimacy to a diamond. We rely on that. And again, it comes back to the issue of responsibility. Can you rely on a certificate when you sell? Or do you take personal responsibility for the diamond that you sell? And if it comes back to you, you have to pass it back up the chain as far as you can. And this issue is coming up in all sorts of cases. Martin this morning in his speech said that you should require from your suppliers to put on their invoices natural untreated diamond, which kind of takes care of the treatments and the synthetics and everything. But you're putting it on your invoice. You are taking a personal commitment to say, this is what I'm selling you, and if I'm wrong, I take it back and I deal with it. So it's all about taking responsibility and not passing the responsibility off to, well, the lab said it's an E, so it must be an E. If you can see it's not, you need to take responsibility. And that's in terms of treatment, in terms of color clarity, and all of that. You're responsible for what you sell. If you want to sell something of lesser quality and pass it off as something of higher quality, that's going to come back to bite us all one day.
I think we can solve that in 1 second. How many people agree? Wait, I don't want to try to influence the outcome, but all three of those examples, in my mind, are clearly fraud. Anybody agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, we agree. We agree.
No, we all agree.
All right. But bending grading rules requires a key definition. And I just wanted to address that very, very briefly, and that is, what's acceptable grading tolerance in the diamond grading world for clarity and color? I've always believed that plus minus 1 grade seems to be the industry standard for acceptability in clarity and color grading. So if you look at a report and you see it as it says VS2, and if you see a report from another laboratory that says VS1, or you see a report from another laboratory that says SI1, all three of those grades are probably acceptable, at least from my understanding of our industry. Maybe we need to clarify that a little more or make it more formal. I'm not sure. The problem, though, is that when you have stones that don't fall, if we can just for a moment just say, let's accept that for clarity and color, and say, okay, that's acceptable if you see that kind of a range. What happens, though, when you have a VS2 from one laboratory, but the grade from another laboratory is VVS2, which is clearly two grades higher than accepted gemological tolerance. Now you're in a situation where there's probably a level of incompetence and or intent. Oh, also I want to stop for 1 second. all of the things about bending grading rules and standards, you really cannot judge people that are in our industry that do that, because guess what? Culturally, there are differences in ethics and morality depending on cultures on our planet. So we are a worldwide industry, and so things that maybe as an American you might say, no, that's wrong, that's unethical, or that's immoral to do. There are other cultures it's perfectly acceptable and in fact even expected to do that. So I would like to submit, we just take the judgment away from that for the moment, and then let's look again at this problem of more than plus minus 1 grade in clarity or color.
Pete?
Yes?
Even with the plus or minus 1 grade, okay, unless there's a baseline standard. One lab says it's a VS2. Another one, the other lab says it's an SI1. The third lab says it's a VS1. Between 1 and 3, you've got 2 grades. Which one's the baseline?
GIA grades, whether they're right or not. Unfortunately, whether they're right or not. Believe it or not, I disagree with a lot of GIA grades, but I'm also smart enough to know if the AGS lab grading deviates too far from GIA grades, we're always wrong. Always. Not sometimes wrong. We are always wrong. GIA is the de facto standard in the diamond world, and every other lab has to, in order to survive, be close to GIA. Period.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you will find laboratories, though, that purposely are going to grade 2 or 3 off.
Correct. And
they're going to go to people and say, buy mine. Buy my certificate. You can bluff your customer with them.
Yeah, it's more saleable.
What?
It's a more saleable report.
Well, you know, people, I mean, you brought it up before about the internet. People do it. And I think at some stage, I don't know, maybe some class action lawyer can get involved, but at some stage, that is fraud. Yeah. Don't use that GIA standard. Use a numerical standard. Start your ABCs, but you know, maybe there needs to be a requirement on the certificate as to what standard you're using. But fraud is what we've been talking about. And I think that you were transitioning the conversation to say, look, laboratories are critical. They're going to become more critical as more technology comes up. And the point I was trying to make this morning is the diamond industry can't pack all their problems and say, not my responsibility, it's the labs. If you sell something, you have to stand behind it. If you take your car and it's not your fault and you ram someone's other car, okay? If your ox or someone else's ox, you're responsible. It's not necessarily I don't care if it's your fault. You're responsible. You sell something, whether it's a synthetic stone, treated stone, blood diamond, in violation of OFAC rules, in violation of the Patriot Act. They don't say, well, what was your intent necessarily? They said, you have violated the law, sir. Now you have to pay it. So in terms of money, I would like to
Setting a stolen diamond, you had that example.
Yeah, well, yeah, go to the GI, take a diamond. You don't know, you're as innocent as the white snow of Christmas, and you submit it to the GIA. It turns out the diamond is a stolen diamond. You didn't know. You show up at the GIA, and there's a cop there with some handcuffs. You do get handcuffed, and you do get to go to Rikers Island. I know that personally from some guy who I bailed out of there, okay? And hey, but I didn't know. So what? You sold something to somebody, you have to take responsibility. And you can't put it on the lab, you can't give the guys, no crybaby stories here. So that's something we just published an article with Trust and Verification, a la Ronald Reagan, President Reagan. The bottom line here is I think that this idea that we can flop off our problems in the laboratories, it's not right. When you brought up the issue, Jerry, of SI3, I said, the hell with the gemologists. We are responsible. But I say it now, too, the other way. We, as a diamond industry, as merchants, as business people, as retailers, we make our money based on our expertise and our ability to service our clients because we know what we're talking about. And if we make mistakes, we should eat them. We should pay the money. And by the way, that's a great incentive for people not to make too many mistakes. Because if you can get away with it and not pay for it, then you start your Mr. Crybaby. And I believe I think that the standard that has to be applied. Yeah, I'm talking too much.
I think to the extent that you can take that responsibility, I mean, we already talked about the fact that HTHP treatment and things like that require sophisticated lab analysis, and if the lab says that it is in fact a natural untreated diamond and I would sell it as such and it turned out not to be, you know, here I find myself in a position where I'm no expert on that. I don't have those kind of qualifications. I don't have that kind of equipment. That's what I rely on an expert to do for me, that I've paid for that service. So the responsibility does get deferred to the lab in that sense. So,
what does that mean? Would you be looking to the lab to make it right? Would you be looking to the lab to compensate you?
I don't know if I'd look, I don't know where the compensation is a different...
The retailer would, I mean, the public would return it to you. You would take it back.
You would take it back, yeah.
So you are taking responsibility.
Okay.
Where would you go from there?
Yeah, but by the way, what's the most important information on the certificate? The date.
Yeah, I heard that this morning.
The point, though, is that they're only guaranteeing what they can guarantee you.
Today.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you need to tell your customer there is evil in the world. There is the synthetics and whatever have you. I'm giving you just like the GA does in the back of their grading report, or the IGI does. This is what our opinion is based on.
To the best
It's
of
a
our
very unfortunate thing that consumers are going to freak out when you tell them, well, I don't really know what I'm selling you. You know, that's kind of funny. But still in all, maybe you want to know who your supplier is. Okay? But I think that you have to be responsible, your supplier has to be responsible. And by the way, I don't think this is anything new. In Antwerp in the year, I think it was 1700 and something, they passed a law that you were not allowed to sell glass in Antwerp. Glass. Okay? And this is a law in the books. I think it's still on there almost. And the reason was because they were afraid of substitution for diamond. So, you know, I think that if the buck stops with the person who sells it, I think UCC law, by the way, will also say that if you're a person who's a merchant, your responsibility is higher than if you're a consumer. So you have that responsibility now. You say go back to the lab with it?
I'm asking.
Buy insurance, errors and omissions. Oh, go ahead. You going to give us money over here?
No.
You know, I believe in always doing the next right thing. And if that were the case, and we have the technology and know how we made a mistake, I think we should make it right, personally.
Do labs have insurance?
Yeah, we do have insurance.
Okay.
There's an important thing that all of us need to realize, and that is all laboratories, we are reactive. The treaters are proactive. We can never be proactive. We can't see to the future to say, oh, what are these guys doing? You know, we sometimes see things in laboratories and we go, this is kind of funny, and we talk with De Beers and other people in our industry to say, what's going on here? But it's always a reactive thing, and that's why at least AGS lab reports, and I'm pretty sure GI reports, and all laboratories reports are heavily disclaimed when it comes to the detection of treatments because of the fact that we are always in a reactive mode. We can't proactively try to solve all of the possible ways that diamonds could be treated. So cut us a little slack there, please. There was one other quick point, but as usual, I'm not as sharp as I used to be.
Excuse me, I have to run everybody, but thank you very much.
What?
Yeah.
One more question real quick, Sal.
Okay, one more thing then, I really would like to get onto the statistics because...
Well, this won't take too long. It's an interesting story, a little off topic, but nonetheless, I think you might find it interesting. A customer of mine brought in a stone for recutting it. Was taken out of a mounting, bought off the streets, weighed 5 carats and 37. I worked on the stone and cleaned up the crown. It was all bruised and abraded, the facet junctions, etc. I sent it to the lab, GIA, and they made a determination that it was an eye color VVS1 potential. Eye color it was, that's the way I saw it, and they told me that it was VVS1 potential. And I asked them, okay, that's great, why don't you send me the worksheet? This is a worksheet right here, or as they call it, a sleeve. Okay, I took the stone and I looked at it. It had, this is like a road map for me. There's a feather on the table and there's a feather on the bottom girdle break. So I removed them. That was on the 14th of last month. On the 14th of last month, they kept the stone for a long time, and I kept wondering, you know, why? Because it's a 5 carat. Why are you? And it went in for a re-exam, so it shouldn't take so long. On Friday, I got the result. You're going to love this. Eye color, no problem. VVS2. From what they told me was potential of VVS1, now it became an eye color VVS2. It says right here, key to symbols, no inclusions. Comments, clarity grade is based on internal graining that is not shown. So in other words, they reversed, they went backwards on the grade. They had told me that the stone was potentially internally flawless if you remove these two feathers. It's never happened to me before, but it just reminds me of the current issues that I see within the GIA these days with their inconsistent grading, with their, it's just another example. It's just interesting to me. Thought I might share that with you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, and I understand the pain that goes into, you know, a VVS1, you know, which could go one way, going the other way. And we had that discussion this morning, and the question, you know, that I raised was, well, the GIA and anyone else, any other lab, has to call it as they see it. And you said to me, well, no, they have to honor at least the original thing that they gave it. You know, they gave it a VVS1. You can't send it back and then go down. You've got to honor at least what you gave. And I respectfully disagree. I think you have to call it as you see it. And that's the only way the labs can maintain their integrity. It's a question about why labs are intent on knowing that you've resubmitted the same stone, because if they're calling it as they see it, each stone should be treated as a new stone every time. But I know the labs like to know this stone was there so that, at least for our, you know, internal standards, if I gave it an E once, I want to give it an E again if I can. And that's, you know, maybe moving the standards to be a little bit, you know, away from calling it as they see it at the time. Let's leave that there. I want to go on to a couple of insights from RapNet. Yeah. A quick look at some statistics. Some are more interesting than others, so I'll just speed through the ones that are less interesting. These are diamonds on RapNet by laboratory. RapNet is maybe a little bit GIA-centric. So I don't know if I can say that this is 100% a mirror of, you guys can't see it, I'm sorry. If this is 100% a mirror of the diamond trade, but I think it's pretty close. On RapNet, as of May 29th, we had 904,000 diamonds, of which 64% were GIA, 9% IGI, a further 9% were uncertified, and then the two big EGLs, Israel and USA, had 6% each. HRD coming in with 3%, and then 2% were other, and AGS is in the region of the 1 or 2% over there as well. If you want to compare it to last year, where we had many less diamonds, fewer, I should say, sorry, many fewer diamonds. Interesting, what I notice here is that if you look at the far right, which is, I see that, yeah, they're not labeled the, I don't know what happened to the labels. Anyway, interesting. I'm not sure what happened to the labels, but the ones next to IGI are the EGLs, and then AGS, and on the far right is other. Other has gone down significantly as a percentage of RapNet, and IGI has gone up from about they were, I think, 6.5% to about 9% of RapNet stones. IGI is the only real market gainer in RapNet over the last year. EGL both went up about 1%, IGI about 3 or 4%, which represents a 50% increase in IGI. GIA stayed pretty much stable. I'm sorry about the labels there. This I find interesting, although you guys may find it less interesting. I'm looking at DIFs, FEVS2, GVS1s, ISO1s as a category of diamonds, and looking at which lab has what. If you have a look across left to right, you can see GIA, IGI, HRD, EGLs. The reason I'm not presenting some of the other labs here is because the amount of diamonds is just too small to really make a call on what percentage they make up of the RapNet population. And you can see between the years things have stayed roughly the same. A lot of well, I'm not going to actually interpret the slide because it's quite interesting. If you have a look at it, there's some very interesting what people are sending to labs to get which kind of grades. It comes out there. Yeah, this is just searches on RapNet. What do people look for? 64% of our searches are for GIA only. A further 15% is any lab, no particular preference. There's quite a high preponderance of IGI, GIA, IGI together, GIA, IGI, HRD, and EGL, and then getting to this. So that's the way people are searching. In other words, when the RapNet community is looking for diamonds, this is what kind of labs they're looking for. And let me just get through this one. Two interesting slides here. And I don't know how to explain this. I've come up with a few various explanations, but I'd rather not present them here because I'm not sure that I'm correct. I also only took diamonds where I had a significant population that I could actually make a conclusion for, and that's why you have some of these weird sizes in the thing. Essentially what we did here is we took the index, we took the average of all diamonds D to M, IF to SI3, VG plus, in each category, and then we indexed them to GIA. So on RapNet, if you take GIA as 100, a similar AGS stone, for example, in the half carat would sell at a premium of 13, whereas an HRD stone would sell at a discount of 97. This is when you take the full range, D to M, IF to SI3, VG plus. When you take just the smaller range of the collection diamonds, D to H, IF to VVS2, you see here GIA stands as the leader with everyone else selling as a discount to GIA. Now there may be reasons for this that I don't understand. It could be that people, for example, who do AGS programs send all their diamonds to AGS, and so that's why the D2M AGS you see a premium for those grades, whereas in the D2H IF to VVS2 GIA stands as the market leader. I don't actually know why the statistic comes out as it does. All I know is that I checked it a few times to make sure we got the numbers right. So I'm not going to go into these slides. I think people find these numbers very interesting, so I just wanted to make sure that I present it. And with that, really, I wanted to end the conference unless there's any more questions. Essentially, it's about standards. Essentially, it's about taking responsibility. Essentially, it's about making sure that the industry and that the players in the industry do what's best for everybody, because otherwise we could find ourselves being caught up in a backlash that won't be healthy for anybody. Any questions? Anybody else want to say anything? Yeah.
I agree with, I apologize, I forget your name, this gentleman on the right.
I'm the other Martin.
The other Martin. That you have to use the certificates. I mean, that's what you pay a professional for, to use the certificates. My question is, how many of the popular labs, the EGL, the IGI, the AGS, the GIA that's popular in America, how many certificate or how many appraisers appraise that stone before it's given the grade? For each of those 4 labs. Does anybody know that? Is it one person's opinion? No. Or 2 or 3 people's opinion at the lab?
At the lab, it's generally 3 as far as... it's generally 3, right?
At least 2 people look at every clarity grade and color. Larger sizes have at least 3. And you disagree between the first 2 graders, you have to have a supervisor look at that stone as well. So essentially, clarity colors are at least in 2 people's hands.
Yeah, generally 2, sometimes 3 if there's a disagreement. 2 graders and a dartboard. Okay. Yeah. Anyone?
Several?
Oh wait, Jerry, you wanted to. We spoke once. If we could just, we spoke a little bit about synthetics and treatment of and finding synthetics, and there's no bigger place that this is a problem than in melee, where parcels are mixed, and So I know Jerry wanted to address that point for a few minutes, if he could. Yeah, you do.
Just that I'm not surprised that we found those 600 CVD diamonds. As soon as they started commercializing CVD diamonds.
CVD's lab-grown diamonds.
Right. Well, chemical vapor deposits. And they're white. And so it's not surprising to me that this happened. As soon as they started selling synthetic diamonds commercially, somebody's going to do fraud. And they did, but we busted them. So that's it. And it's more coming. There'll be more, and it's a more serious problem, particularly in melee. And we're addressing it, and we can identify every one of them. We have the equipment. Thank you.
Okay, Gary, you want to wrap it up, and then we can let everybody go since we're over time.
I'd actually like to put a consumer's point of view on behalf of the forums from PriceScope, where lots of very educated and serious diamond junkies look at our industry and look at what they see on grading reports. And I'd like to say that it is such a shame that we can't go back and actually redesign the entire system, because almost every part of what we see on a grading report actually doesn't make sense at some level or another. So we talked mainly about clarity today, and one of the things that smart consumers notice is that the clarity grade changes as much. In the middle clarities and the lower clarities, the clarity grade changes as much based on the size of the diamond as it does on the clarity grade itself. So if you take an inclusion, a VS2 inclusion in a 10-carat diamond and pop it in a 1-point diamond or a 10-point diamond, it's an I3 or an I1. So that's one of the things that they wrestle with within our industry. And that's what Martin was saying, is that we have all these different standards. Now, consumers aren't all that smart, because they're not smart enough, for example, to know that a feather that you can't see in an SI2 that runs across the top of the stone could well result in the diamond breaking. So they're not perfect, and they don't understand about clouds. But you know, the colour grading system, virtually everything in our grading systems is fundamentally wrong from a consumer protection point of view. The colour grade face-up is often 2 or 3 grades different between a diamond that could be cut from the same rough that was the same colour, depending on the cut of the diamond. So there isn't very much that makes sense in our grading reports. And probably one of the worst ones is that people are frightened to buy fluorescent diamonds because most fluorescent diamonds are supposedly going to be hazy, although we know that most fluorescent diamonds aren't hazy. So take Venus, as Martin was talking before. Venus tell you what the transparency of the diamond is. So there is a lot of ground to be covered if people wanted to get together and actually come up with appropriate grading systems that matched what consumers see and talk about all the time on the forums. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you very much for participating. Thank everybody else. And we'll continue the discussion between now and the next Vegas, and we'll see you here next Vegas. Thank you very much, everybody.